What's up, guys? Last time I posted a video reviewing one of these, and so on, but we didn't do the very last one, and it has some cool stuff, so I wanted to cover that as well. String methods are not new. We've used these guys before, upper and lower, and they will take a string and make it uppercase or lower, as you might have guessed from the name. Method is a word you may not have seen before, but you've seen functions, and a method is just a function that's in a class. So a class is something we'll start making soon, but until then we'll see the ones that are already made, like a string. A string is a class, meaning it has certain properties, it has certain things it can do, and these little guys with the things it can do, they have parentheses after them just like a function. They do some action just like a function, and the difference is they're attached to an object with a dot. You'll have your string dot upper or your string dot find or whatever. So swap case, you might guess what that means. Strip is a very useful one because, you know, if you're typing in a text box, you might have a space before or a space after, especially if you do autocomplete. Oftentimes autocomplete will do a space to get you to type the next word, you know. But if we don't want that, we can use this strip because it's a very common thing you want to do. It will just cut off any blank characters from the front and back. Find is where you're gonna give it a character or more than one characters, and it'll tell you where that appears in the string using the index. So if I say something that's at the beginning of the string, it'll give us 0. And let's do some of these guys that use that one and maybe some other ones. The what's in a name is kind of interesting because you don't actually need these, but you can do it with these. So let's take a look at that one. So what's in a name, it's going to give us a name and a letter, and we're going to say true or false. So like if they give us Michelangelo and A, we say true. But if they give us Gretchen and S, we say false because it's not in there. Okay. So I don't know why they put this right here because we don't actually need any of those things. We could just say return letter in name because we learned the in keyword, and so if it's in there, it's going to say true. If it's not, it's going to say false. And that perfectly works with exactly what they want. But I think they wanted us to use the find because they just did that in the previous step. So let's use the find. This is a good hint that whenever we make one of these functions, there are a million ways to do it, right? You could do it using this, you could do it using find, you could do it using other stuff too. And if you're trying to work one way, maybe there's another. So we're going to say, let's forget about this. Let's use a different. I was going to say the word method, but I mean method in English, just path. So let's say we're going to find the letter in the name, and if we do find it, we'll say true. If we don't find it, we'll say false. So let's say I equals name.find letter, and what that is it gives you the index, so that if it says like the thing at the end, it would give us 0, 1, 2, 3, or W is not in there, it would give us -1. That's the false answer is -1. So let's say if I is greater than -1, return true, else return false. And that's going to do the job unless I messed it up. Yeah. So the first version I typed with like letter in name, that works just fine. This one, that works just fine, but it helps us practice the new little guy right here. And maybe in some rare case, these wouldn't work the same. Like maybe there's some crazy combination of characters that would give us a different answer using the letter in name versus this. But I don't think so. I think they're both going to be totally reasonable. And let's go on to the next one, because the next one is more interesting, using the two-part structure. I always say the two-parters are the ones that you want to focus on, because they will start with a basic mechanic and then add something cool to it. And that's what we do whenever we type any real program, is you kind of get the core skeleton in there, and then you fill it in to make it pretty, or make it user-friendly, or make it optimized, you know. So part one, remove all from string. It's going to give us a word and a letter, and we want to remove that letter. So if it gives us Python and in, we're going to say Pytho. Or if it gives us pancakes and A, we're going to say pancakes. So the string is going to be everything except the letter here. And they're going to tell us you must use all of these guys, which kind of limits us, because like I just said in the last one, there are infinite ways to do things. Well, this is giving us a smaller possibility space, but still within that we can use a lot of different paths to get to it. Let's delete what was there and type it ourselves. So we're going to say, okay, remove all from string, and it gets a word and a letter. It doesn't really have to be a word. It could be 5 words. It could be whatever. But this letter does have to be 1. It's going to say assume that it's only 1. So we can cheat a little bit, because spoiler, part 2 is going to say, what if they give you more than 1? So let's say they're going to give us Python, and we're going to return Pytho without the in. So one way to do it is to use the find that we just used in the last guy and go to that spot, and then don't put that in our answer, you know? So let's do that. Now, the thing is, it might be in there more than once. So like Python only has in once, but what if it was, you know, banana and it had in multiple times? We need to keep checking until it's gone. So that's why they say a while loop. Okay, that's not the only way to do it. You could use a for loop and just check every letter until the letters are done. But a while loop is fine. So I'm going to say, let's do our core thing first, and then let's wrap it in a while loop, because you don't want to think top to bottom always. You usually want to think like inside out, like what are we doing? And then we want to think like how many times are we doing it, or how is it looping, or whatever. So what are we doing when we find our little guy? We're going to say, let's say I equals word.find letter. And this is finding the spot, the index, which is why it kind of makes sense to call it I, but you can call it whatever you want, equals the spot where it is. So if they give us Python and in, we're going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be the spot where the in is, you know? And then we want to cut it out. But we can't really do that. You can't just say, like, delete this spot in a string. You could in a list. So one of the infinite ways we could do this in theory is to turn it into a list and then remove those and then turn it back into a string. But that's not what they're asking for here. So what we're going to do is the same thing we did over here. If you remember, there was one where you would turn it into a dash. I think it was this guy, where it was like the word house and then it would say U and we would change it to where it's HO-SE. We're going to do the same thing we did there, which is to say like everything before and then whatever we're putting in there, which in this case is nothing, and then everything after. So we're going to go word equals everything up to I, and then I always hit shift for some reason and do a curly bracket, and then everything after I plus 1. So what this means is like we're going to go around it. So if they give us Python and T, for example, we would go up to it and get the PY, and then we would skip it, which is the plus 1, and do everything after. So we'd go PY plus HON. Or if they give us the word chicken and K, we would go CHIC, stop, skip over the K, EN. Okay, so that's what this line is doing. It says we're going to go up to the spot we want and then go after the spot we want. Not doing anything to delete our guy, we're just doing a way of adding everything else. You know, it's sort of a roundabout way, but it's pretty short, and it's something we've done before over here, so it works. Again, this is not the only way. There are a zillion paths you could take to accomplish this goal, but I think this is a fine one. So we're going to say, okay, find the spot where the letter is, and then dance around it. But like I said, we might have to do that more than once. We might have to say, oh, if they give us pancakes and A, well, we find one and remove it, but there's another one. So that's where the while loop comes in, which again is not the only way to achieve this, but it's one way. So I'm going to wrap this up inside a while loop and say, hey, keep doing it if you need to. Which is also going to make it so that it doesn't do it at all if we don't need it at all. So for example, I'm going to say while letter in word, you do this stuff, which is going to help us in two ways. One, it's going to do it multiple times if we need to do it multiple times. But two, it's going to skip it if we don't need it. If they give us bananas and F, then it's going to skip this entirely and not worry about, oh, is this going to give us an error? Nope, who cares? It's not. Okay. So this helps us in two ways. That's great. So we're not done because we need to return word to whoever asked for it. You know, some other part of the program would say, hey, I'm going to send you a word and a letter, and you're going to send me the answer after you've done this process to it. And usually I like to give it a new name, like I would call this new word, and then have like new word equals the old one, stripped the other guy, and then return new word, just to have like the original one intact in case I ever need it or whatever. I like to give things different names. But in that case, it wouldn't work because it wouldn't fit with the while setup. You wouldn't be able to mention new word and create new word later and blah, blah, blah. So this, well, let's test it. Maybe I'm overconfident. Maybe I messed something up. The suspense. Okay, this is good. It says if you send it house in H, it's going to return house. If you send it German house in H, it's going to return house. If you send it casa in C, if you send it maison in M, and then one that's hidden, which I assume is going to be not at the beginning, because for these it was giving us all at the beginning of the word. So if it sent us, board and R, it would go to the R spot, cut it out, and give you BOAD. Now, let's go to the part 2, because whenever they give you a part 2, that's always like they're saving the good stuff for the second one. And they're going to say, take your function and add something to it to make it slightly different. So I'm going to go copy what I've got so I can put it in the next guy. And this one says, instead of, wait, I clicked on the wrong thing. This one says, instead of a single letter, you might have to find 2 or 5 or 0. So if they give you bananas and na, you're going to remove the na and remove the second na and return bas. Okay, so the stuff it's looking for is pretty much the same except for this guy, and we're going to have to add and rearrange what we got to make it so that it can handle that. Okay, so we need to change one part, which is how far it goes. Like right here, it's not going to be +1, it's going to be plus something else. And we need to set that up with a little bit beforehand, so let's do that. So word and letter, this time it's not going to be a letter, so we want to change the name of this, because if we still call it letter, it would still work, but it would be weird. So I'm going to call it subword, because it's like a part of the word. Maybe a big part, maybe a small part. Who knows? And then I'm going to change all the times when I say letter to something else. This is the danger of copying and pasting, though. When I copied the thing from last one and I'm changing it, I might forget one instance of letter, and I might, leave that in there and find an error later when it's like, letter, what's that? So I could Control F and say, hey, look, I got him. Okay. So let's say if I run it right now, it's going to work for single letters. I don't remember if one of their test cases is a single letter. It's giving me a lot of green because it's checking for all the boring stuff, like did you use a find, did you use while? But when it's actually using a real test, see, there's one where it did a single letter, no more ins, and it took out the in. That still works because it's still doing the same thing. But it didn't work when you're trying to take out the na from banana, because it can't handle jumping over more than one character. So if you see, it's giving us a hint to use len and then use that. So I'm going to go before this part, which is the engine where all the stuff happens. I need to get a little more info. I'm going to make another variable, and I'm going to call it j, I guess, because when you do I, the next one just naturally, in that sort of algebra pattern of using the next one, kind of fits, even though that doesn't make sense with the meaning, so I might want to change it later. But j is going to be how much we need to jump ahead. In this one, we jumped ahead 1 because it was guaranteed, but now it's not. So I'm going to go len of subword. Len means length. And so this returns how many characters it is. Or you could use len on other stuff. You could use len on a list or a tuple or a set or whatever, and it'll tell you how many items it has. And it's not always for strings. So now I'm going to jump ahead J, because when I'm doing my word and I'm cutting out stuff, remember, I'm not actually caring about the part I'm cutting out. I'm just caring about everything else. So I would go to like the word before that thing and then the word after that thing. If I'm doing bananas and I'm cutting out na, I would go up to the na and then after. And then I would be left with, it would be like something like this. I would go this, and then I would go up to the first one after, and then I would see it's still there. So then I would go up to the first one and then after. So it would go through the loop twice, removing each one as it sees it, and then go from there. So this is really not as hard as it sounds. When you think, oh my gosh, it's a subword with multiple parts, maybe I have to do like some crazy way of handling that. No, because at least the way we set it up is that you're not caring about the subword at all. You're just caring about the rest of the word before and after. And so all you need to know is how far you jump ahead to skip the thing. Now, for some reason, they set this one up differently. So if I hit check code, they're actually not going to like it, which is weird. But here's what they're going to say. They're going to say, you have to actually do it with the word. It says you should test your function with bananas. I don't know why. In the last one, it would just fill in stuff for the parameters. But in this one, it says, no, you do the work. You fill it in. So what it wants us to do is like actually say, I don't know why. I messed up for the first time I tried this too. It wants us to say like, hey, I am sending you bananas and na. And then I am actually printing that. And then finally, it's going to like it. So if I hit run, I would get an outcome that just says boss, because it does VA, cuts out the first NA, loops through, cuts out the other one, done, return, print, bada bing, bada boom. So I don't know why it wants us to do it when most of the functions it tells us to make, we just leave them floating in the cytoplasm. But in this case, they're telling us, so we do what they tell us. What the heck? And when you're writing a program in real life, you will often add a line that just says print and then try it, even though that's not going to be in the final version. You just want to test it because you don't want to like just hope that it's going to work and you have 5 functions bouncing back and forth and you haven't tested each one. And, you know. So that's that. The next part is a quiz, and I'm not going to go through that because that's boring. But now we've covered all the different sections of this unit. So I'll stop this video now before it gets too long, and you can work on this or the other thing. Thanks.